Good day and welcome back to Scriptures Unlocked. We are now on to Genesis chapter 36, where we will examine Esau's genealogy, where we will look at the final time that Esau will be mentioned in the book of Genesis. And it's important to look at Esau's genealogy because it will again prove that God means what he says and says exactly what he means. Because he told Rebekah when she was pregnant that two nations would be separated from her womb. And these two nations would later become the nation of Israel, headed by Jacob, and the nation of Edom, headed by Esau. So this presentation will look at Esau's descendants, and in particular, I'll spend some time to look at one of Esau's descendants, a notable man by the name of Amalek, because this particular descendant of Esau had a particular history with the people of Israel. And I'll examine and show you that this is where this nation, the Amalekites, came from. So without further ado, let's get into this presentation, which is entitled Esau's Descendants. So in the previous presentation, we ended with the death and burial of Isaac at the age of 180 years old by his two sons, Jacob and Esau, who were now, at the time of his death, 120 years old. This presentation will focus on Esau's descendants to close the loop and show that God fulfilled his word to Rebekah when she was pregnant with twins. And here's a flashback to that incident. Genesis 25, verse 20 onwards tells us this. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated Jehovah for his wife, because she was barren. And Jehovah was entreated of her, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So after 20 years of marriage, Isaac's prayer was finally answered when Rebekah conceived, but unknown to her, twins were in her womb, and there was a constant struggle between them. Genesis 25, verse 22 to 25 tells us this. And the children struggled together within her, and she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of Jehovah. And Jehovah said unto her, Two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So what we have just looked at, viewers, is that Isaac married Rebekah when he was 40 years old. And 20 years later, he had twins with Rebekah, his wife. And they were born when Isaac was 60 years old. And that is why we know that 20 years passed from the time of their marriage to the time of the children's birth. So that was what was happening at the time. And God told her that she's pregnant with twins. And these two boys were struggling, they were striving to gain the supremacy over each other. Esau was born first, but God told her that the elder Esau would serve the younger Jacob. So viewers, throughout this series and in the previous presentations, we have been looking at the formation of Jacob's family that eventually became the nation of Israel. So it's time to review Esau's descendants that became the nation of Edom, which takes us now to Genesis chapter 36, verse 1. Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. Esau was so named because of the incident where he sold his birthright for a pot of stew in Genesis 25, verse 30. And Genesis 36 verse 2 tells us that Esau took his wives of the daughters of Canaan, Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite. And Bashemath, Israel's daughter, sister of Nebaioth. And Adah bare to Esau Eliphaz, and Bashemath bare Reuel. And Aholibamah bare Yehush and Yaalam and Korah. These are the sons of Esau, which were born unto him in the land of Canaan. So Esau had 3 wives, from whom he fathered 5 sons. And we were told that these Hittite wives of Esau were a grief to his parents in Genesis 26, verse 34, and in particular, verse 35. And Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. Why? For their riches were more than they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Thus Esau dwelt in Mount Seir, and again it is repeated, Esau is Edom. So God is telling us here through the scriptures that Esau became the father of the nation of Edom. So Esau was a very wealthy man, and he was blessed by God, since he also was a descendant of Abraham, and God had promised that he would bless Abraham and his seed. So Esau moved to the area of Mount Seir, and Esau became the progenitor of the Edomites. Seir occurs 39 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is Strong's H 8165, and it means hairy or shaggy. And this is also a particular characteristic trait or a physical feature of Esau. Esau came out when he was born red and hairy. So Seir was also the proper masculine noun of the first patriarch of the Horites, the inhabitants of Edom before the descendants of Esau, the Edomites. So Seir was the name of a man, and the place was also named after him. So Seir is actually an eponym for the first patriarch of the Horites. Seir is also the proper noun with reference to territory. That's the land where Esau went to dwell. It is the land of Edom, south of the Dead Sea. And it's also the same name that is given to the mountain range in Edom, extending from the Dead Sea to the Atlantic Gulf. Edom occurs 100 times in scripture. It is Strong's H 123. It has been translated as Edom 87 times, Edomites 9 times, and Idumea 4 times. Edom means red. And Edom, or the Edomites, were the descendants of Esau. Mount Seir was divinely assigned to Esau and his descendants by God Almighty as a possession, as can be seen in the following verses. Notice what God said about Edom. Speaking about this, God said in Deuteronomy 2, verse 2 to 5, God said this, and God was speaking to the children of Israel after they came out of Egyptian slavery during the Exodus. God said this to them as they made their way to the land of Canaan. And Jehovah spake unto me, saying to Moses, Ye have compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, notice what God was saying to them now. Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir. So these were now the Edomites at this point in time. And they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore. Meddle not with them, for I will not give you of their land. No, not so much as a footbreadth. Why? Because I have given Mount Seir unto Esau for a possession. So God makes it absolutely clear here in Deuteronomy 2, verse 5, that he gave Mount Seir to the Edomites, the descendants of Esau, for a possession. And notice again what God said to them in Deuteronomy 23, verse 7. This is God speaking to the Israelites. God said to them, Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite. Why? For he is thy brother. Because the Edomites are relatives of the Israelites. They are children of Esau. And Esau was the twin brother of Jacob, who became the father of the Israelite nation. So God is saying here, thou shalt not hate an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt also not hate an Egyptian, because thou art a stranger in his land. And notice again in Joshua 24, verse 3 and 4, God again says this through Joshua at the time. And I took your father from the other side of the flood, and led him through all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his seed, and gave him Isaac. And I gave unto Isaac Jacob and Esau. And I gave unto Esau Mount Seir to possess it. But Jacob and his children went down into Egypt, and they were forced into slavery. So viewers, God is making it very clear here that the Edomites are descendants of Esau, and he gave them Mount Seir, the same place that Esau went after he separated from Jacob because of the magnitude of their possessions. Viewers, let's now look at the descendants of Esau, because this presentation is entitled Esau's Descendants. Genesis 36 verse 9 to 12 tells us this. And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in Mount Seir. The scripture is repeating for emphasis that Esau is the father of the Edomites, and their land of possession was Mount Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Bashemath, the wife of Esau. And the sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, and Gatam, and Kenaz. And notice now, the most notable of Esau's descendants is going to be a man by the name of Amalek. And Timnah was concubine to Eliphaz, Esau's son, and she bare to Eliphaz Amalek. And these were the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. So let's now look at Amalek. I'll spend some time to go through the history of Amalek with Israel, because it's very important, because this series is on the book of Genesis. And it's important for us to understand where all these nations came from and what is their antecedents. So now we're looking at Amalek, from which we will get the nation of the Amalekites. And we have seen so far that Amalek was the grandson of Esau. And even though he was the grandson of Esau and a relative to the Israelites, he hated the Israelites. So now we're going to look at the history of the Amalekites in the scriptures. So this is the first time in all of scripture where the name Amalek occurs. So let's now look at the history of the Amalekites and the Israelites. So Amalek, this is the Hebrew script of Amalek's name. Amalek occurs 39 times in the Hebrew scriptures. It is Strong's H 6002. It is translated as Amalek 24 times and Amalekites 15 times. Amalek simply means dweller in a valley. He is the son of Eliphaz by his concubine Timnah. He was grandson of Esau and progenitor of a tribe of people in southern Canaan. And his descendants were called the Amalekites. So Esau's grandson Amalek and his descendants, the Amalekites, became bitter enemies of Jacob's children and featured prominently in the history of Israel, especially when they came out of Egyptian bondage on their way to the promised land. Notice the first time that the Israelites encountered the Amalekites. Exodus 17, verse 8 onwards tells us this. Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in mine hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands were heavy. And they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And Jehovah said unto Moses, notice what God was now going to say to Moses as a result of what Amalek did. Write this for a memorial in a book and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. Why? For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. So viewers, this was the first encounter the children of Israel had with the Amalekites, Esau's descendants. And God told Moses to record this incident in a book so that they would never forget it, because God would not forget it. So notice now in Deuteronomy 25, verse 17 to 19, notice what God said through his prophet Moses. Remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way, when you were come forth out of Egypt. And notice what he did, how he met thee by the way, and smote the hindmost of thee. So he killed all the weak Israelites, the stragglers who were at the back, even all that were feeble behind thee, when thou wast faint and weary, and he feared not God. Therefore it shall be, when Jehovah thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about, in the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that's the land of Canaan, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Thou shalt not forget it. So God told them that they should not forget what the Amalekites did unto the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, and they were hungry, they were tired and weary. Viewers, this promise of God was to be fulfilled centuries later, many centuries later, during the reign of Saul, the first king of Israel. But Saul failed to carry out God's mandate, which almost resulted in the total annihilation of the Jewish population living in the Persian Empire many centuries later, during the time when Esther was queen. Notice now what God told Saul to do. And this takes us now to 1 Samuel 15, verse 1 onwards. Samuel also said unto Saul, Jehovah sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore, hearken thou unto the voice of the words of Jehovah. Thus saith Jehovah hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel. So God never forgot how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass. So that was the directive, that was the commandment that God gave Saul concerning the Amalekites. God told him to destroy everything of the Amalekites. And Saul gathered the people together and numbered them in Telaim, 200,000 footmen and 10,000 men of Judah. And Saul came to a city of Amalek and laid wait in the valley. And Saul said unto the Kenites, Go, depart, get you down from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For ye showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt, which was contrary to what the Amalekites did. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. And Saul smote the Amalekites from Havilah until thou comest to Shur, that is over against Egypt. And notice what he did. And he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, contrary to what God told him in verse 3, to smite and utterly destroy all Amalekites, even the animals. And Saul took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Saul and the people spared Agag, and the best of the sheep, and of the oxen, and of the fatlings, and the lambs, and all that was good, and would not utterly destroy them. But everything that was vile and refuse, that they destroyed utterly. So clearly, viewers, Saul disobeyed God, and it's clear that one of Agag's children was also spared as well, because Haman was later described in the book of Esther as an Agagite, which means he was a direct descendant of Amalekite king Agag. So notice now, when we get to Esther chapter 3, many centuries later, when the people of Judah who were exiled to Babylon, and then now the Persians conquered the Babylonians and were now reigning. So Esther chapter 3 tells us about Haman's plot against the Jews. After these things, did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, notice now, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were before him. So when it says after these things, it is talking about the events that took place in chapter 1 and chapter 2. of Esther. These things refer to Vashti being deposed from being queen, the king having a beauty pageant where Esther was chosen and she became queen, and Mordecai saving the king's life from an assassination plot. Esther 3 verse 2 onwards tells us this. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate after Haman was promoted bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai, who was a Jew, bowed not, nor did him reverence, because Mordecai clearly knew that this man was an Agagite. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, Why transgresseth thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew, and the Amalekites hated the Jews, and the Jews hated the Amalekites. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. And Ahasuerus' kingdom stretched all the way from the Middle East to India. So there was clearly a deep-seated hatred between the Jews, who were Israelites, and the Amalekites. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people. Neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. And notice what he was now going to say. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it into the king's treasuries. That sounded pleasing to the king. So the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. And notice now, the Jews' enemy. Then were the king's scribes called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenants, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to the writing thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed with the king's ring. So it was a royal decree. And the letters were sent by post into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So viewers, Haman the Agagite was trying to exterminate and seek retribution against the Israelites for what Saul had done to the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15, which we read about earlier. Viewers, in everything, there is a lesson to be learned. There is a clear lesson to be learned from this story, and that is the decisions we make today will most certainly have either a positive or a negative impact on our future. Because if Saul had carried out God's command, then Haman, the Agagite, would never have been in existence to exact revenge upon the Jews. So let's now see how this plot unfolded. Esther learns of Haman's plot. This now takes us to chapter 4 of the book of Esther. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and a bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Then called Esther for Hathach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai, to know what it was and why it was. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of the money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also, Mordecai gave Hatak the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, and to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again, Esther spake unto Hatak and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. And this is what she said. Notice what she said. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. And then Esther said, but I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. Because remember, back then, kings had their wives, but the king also had many concubines in his harem. So if he didn't want to sleep with his wife for many months on end, he could have the services of one of his concubines. And here Esther was saying that she has not been called to see the king in 30 days, in a month. So Esther was hesitant to approach a king without being called until Mordecai rebuked her. And note what Mordecai said to her. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, saying, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth? We'll now focus on the life of Joseph and his rise to fame after facing severe adversity. So from Genesis 37 to Genesis 50, which is the last chapter, we will look at the life of Joseph and what happened to the children of Israel as a result of the events that will transpire during these chapters. So have yourselves a great day and stay tuned to the next presentation when we look at the life of Joseph when he was at the age of 17 onwards. Whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Famous words from Mordecai. So Esther, upon the rebuke of Mordecai, planned to intercede. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. The most famous words in the book of Esther. So viewers, the rest, as they say, is history, because Esther intervened, the Jews were spared, and Haman, the Agagite, was hanged along with his 10 sons on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. So viewers, even though the word God or the name of God, Yehovah, is never mentioned in the book of Esther, his divine providence was at play to secure the bloodline of the Jews, from which the Messiah, the only begotten Son of God, would come. So in the end, God's words concerning blotting out the seed of Amalek from under heaven came to fruition. And notice as well what Balaam prophesied concerning the Amalekites. This can be found in Numbers 24, verse 20. And when he, Balaam, looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations to attack the Israelites. But his latter end shall be that he perish forever. And that is exactly what happened. So viewers, having shown you this notable descendant of Esau, the Amalekites, let's now return to Genesis 36 and look at the other names of Esau's descendants who became dukes and bring this presentation to a close. Genesis 36 verse 15 onwards tells us this. These were the dukes of the sons of Esau, the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn son of Esau, Duke Teman, Duke Omar, Duke Zepho, Duke Kenaz, Duke Korah, Duke Gatam, and Duke Amalek. These are the dukes that came of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These were the sons of Adah. And these are the sons of Reuel, Esau's son, Duke Nahath, Duke Zerah, Duke Shammah, Duke Misa. These are the dukes that came of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Bashemath, Esau's wife. And these are the sons of Aholibamah, Esau's wife. Duke Yehush, Duke Ya'alam, Duke Korah. These were the dukes that came of Aholibamah, the daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, who is Edom, and these are their dukes. Viewers, God fulfilled his promise to Rebekah because two nations were indeed separated from her womb. The Edomites, who descended from Esau, and the Israelites, who descended from Jacob. This also fulfilled God's promise to Abraham to make him a father of many nations, which was spoken to him in Genesis 17, verse 4 to 5. Viewers, Genesis 36 is the last time that Esau is mentioned in the book of Genesis, as we will now transition to examine the life of Joseph and culminate with the children of Israel living in Egypt. So viewers, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and from now on,